These are the words of Black Elk. My friend, I am going to tell you the story of my life. And if it were only the story of my life, I think I would not tell it. For what is one man that he should make much of his winters, even when they bend him like a heavy snow? So many other men have lived and shall live that story, to be grass upon the hills. It is a story of all life that is Wakan, and is good to tell, and of us two-leggeds sharing in it, with the four-leggeds and the wings of the air, and all green things. For these are children of one mother, and their father is one spirit. It is the story of a mighty vision given to a man too weak to use it, of a Wakan tree that should have flourished in a people's heart with flowers and singing birds, and now is withered, and of a people's dream that died in bloody snow. But if the vision was true and mighty, as I know it is true and mighty yet, for such things are of the Spirit, and it is in the darkness of their eyes that men get lost. So I know that it is a good thing I am going to do, and because no good thing can be done by any one man alone, I will first make an offering and send a voice to the Spirit of the world, that it may help me to be true. Now I light the sacred chanupa, and after I have offered it to the powers that are one power, and set forth a voice to them, we shall smoke together, offering the mouthpiece first of all to the one above. So I send a voice. Hey, 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 hey. Grandfather, Great Spirit, you have been always, and before you no one has been. There is no other one to pray to but you. You yourself, everything that you see, everything has been made by you. Hear me, four quarters of the world, a relative I am. Give me the strength to walk the soft earth, a relative to all that is. Give me the eyes to see and the strength to understand, that I may be like you. With your power only can I face the winds. This is my prayer, hear me. The voice I have sent is weak, yet with earnestness I have sent it, hear me. It is finished, Heshet Allah. Now, my friend, let us smoke together, so that there may be only good between us. I was born in the moon of the popping trees, on the little Powder River, in the winter when the four crows were killed. I am a Lakota of the Ogallala band. My father's name was Black Elk, and his father before him bore the name, and the father of his father, so that I am the fourth to bear it. He was a medicine man, and so were several of his brothers. Also, he and the great crazy horse's father were cousins, having the same grandfather. My mother's name was White Cow Seas. Her father was called Refuse to Go, and her mother Plenty Eagle Feathers. I was 3 years old when my father's right leg was broken in the Battle of the 100 Slain. From that wound he limped until the day he died. He is buried here in these hills. I can remember that winter of the 100 Slain, as a man may remember some bad dream he dreamed when he was little. But I cannot tell just how much I heard when I was bigger and how much I understood when I was little. It is like some fearful thing in a fog, for it was a time when everything seemed troubled and afraid. I had never seen a Washishu then and did not know what one looked like, but everyone was saying that the Washishus were coming, and that they were going to take our country and rub us all out, and that we should all have to die fighting. It was the Washishus who got rubbed out in that battle. But 100 Washishus was not much if there were others, and others without number, where those came from. When I was older, I learned what the fighting was about that winter and the next summer. Up on the Medicine Fork, the Washishus had found much of the yellow metal that they worship and that makes them crazy, and they wanted to have a road up through our country to the place where the yellow metal was. But my people did not want the road, it would scare the buffalo and make them go away. And also, it would let the other Washishus come in like a river. They told us that they wanted only to use a little land, as much as a wagon would take between the wheels. But our people knew better. And when you look about you, now you can see what it is they wanted. Once we were happy in our own country, and we were seldom hungry. For then the two-legged and the four-leggeds lived together like relatives, and there was plenty for them and for us. But the Washishus came, and they have made little islands for us and other little islands for the four-leggeds. And always these islands are becoming smaller, for around them surges the gnawing flood of the Washishu, and it is dirty with lies and greed. And so when the soldiers came and built themselves a town of logs on the piney fork of the Powder, my people knew they meant to have their road and take our country and maybe kill us all when they were strong enough. Crazy Horse was only about 19 years old then, and Red Cloud was still our great chief. In the moon of the changing seasons, he called together all the scattered bands of the Lakota for a big council on the Powder River. And when we went on the warpath against the soldiers, a horseback could ride through our villages from sunrise until the day was above his head. So far did our camp stretch along the valley of the river, for many of our friends, the Sheila and the Blue Clouds, had come to help us fight. My friend Fire Thunder here, who is older than I, was in that fight, and he can tell you how it was.
Fire Thunder speaks.
I was 16 years old when this happened, and we had moved over to the mouth of Pino Creek. We started out on horseback just about sunrise, riding up the creek toward the soldiers' town on the Piney, for we were going to attack it. The sun was about halfway up when we stopped at the place where the Washishu's road came down a steep, narrow ridge and crossed the creek. It was a good place to fight, so we sent some men ahead to coax the soldiers out. We divided into two parts and hid in the gullies and waited. After a long while, we heard a shot up over the hill, and we knew the soldiers were coming. Soon we saw our men coming back, and some of them were walking and leading their horses, so that the soldiers would think they were worn out. Then the men who had sent ahead came running down the road between us, and the soldiers on horseback followed, shooting. When they came to the flat at the bottom of the hill, the fighting began all at once. I had a sorrel horse, and just as I was going to get on him, the soldiers turned around and began to fight their way back up the hill. I had a 6-shooter that I had traded for, and also a bow and arrows. When the soldiers started back, I held my sorrel with one hand and began killing them with the 6-shooter, for they came close to me. There were many bullets, but there were more arrows. So many that it was like a cloud of grasshoppers all above and around the soldiers. And our people, shooting across, hit each other. The soldiers were falling all the while they were fighting back up the hill, and their horses got loose. Many of our people chased the horses, but I was not after horses. I was after Wasishus. When the soldiers got on top, there were not many of them left, and they had no place to hide. They were fighting hard. We were told to crawl up on them, and we did. When we were close, someone yelled, "Let us go. This is a good day to die. Think of the helpless ones at home." Then we all cried, "Hokkahe," and rushed at them. I was young then and quick on my feet, and I was one of the first to get in among the soldiers. They got up and fought very hard until not one of them was alive. Dead men and horses and wounded Indians were scattered all the way up the hill, and their blood was frozen, for a storm had come up and it was very cold and getting colder all the time. We left all the dead lying there, for the ground was solid, and we picked up our wounded and started back, but we lost most of them before we reached our camp.
Black Elk continues.
I am quite sure that I remember the time when my father came home with a broken leg that he got from killing so many Washishus. It must be the fear that I remember most. All this time I was not allowed to play very far away from our teepee, and my mother would say, If you are not good, the Washishus will come get you. We must have broken camp at the mouth of the Pino soon after the battle, and we were going away from where the soldiers were. I do not know where we went, but it was west. It was a hungry winter, for the deep snow made it hard to find the elk, and also many of the people went snowblind. We wandered a long time. When it was summer again, we were camping on the Rosebud, and I did not feel so much afraid, because the Washishus seemed farther away, and there was peace there in the valley, and there was plenty of meat. But all the boys from 5 or 6 years up were playing war. The little boys would gather together from the different bands of the tribe and fight each other with mud balls that they threw with willow sticks. And the big boys played the game called throwing them off their horses, which is a battle all but the killing, and sometimes they got hurt. When I was older, I too often played this game. We were always naked when we played it, just as warriors are when they go into battle, if it is not too cold, because they are swifter without clothes. I was still too little to play war that summer, but I can remember watching the other boys, and I thought that when we all grew up and were big together, maybe we would kill all the Washishus and drive them far away from our country. It was in the moon, when the cherries turned black, that all the people were talking again about a battle, and our warriors came back with many wounded. It was the attacking of the wagons, and it made me afraid again, for we did not win that battle as we did the other one, and there was much mourning for the dead. Fire Thunder was in that fight too, and he can tell you how it was that day.
Fire Thunder speaks.
It was very bad. There is a wide flat prairie with hills around it, and in the middle of this the Washishus had put the boxes of their wagons in a circle, so that they could keep their mules there at night. There were not many Washishus, but they were lying behind the boxes, and they shot faster than they ever shot at us before. We thought it was some new medicine of great power that they had, for they shot so fast that it was like tearing a blanket. Afterwards I learned that it was because they had new guns that they loaded from behind, and this was the first time they used these guns. We came on after sunrise. There were many of us, and we meant to ride right over them and rub them out. But our ponies were afraid of the ring of fire the guns of the Washishus made, and would not go over. We tried hard, but we could not do it, and there were dead warriors and horses piled all around the boxes and scattered over the plain. Then we left our horses in a gulch and charged on foot, but it was like green grass withering in a fire. So we picked up our wounded and went away. I do not know how many of our people were killed, but there were very many. It was bad.
Black Elk continues.
I was 4 years old then, and I think it must have been the next summer that I first heard the voices. It was a happy summer, and nothing was afraid, because word came from the Washishus that there would be peace, and that they would not use the road anymore, and that all the soldiers would go away. The soldiers did go away, and their towns were torn down, and they made a treaty with Red Cloud that said our country would be ours as long as grass should grow and water flow. You can see that it is not the grass and the water that have forgotten. I was out playing alone when I first heard the voices. It was like somebody calling me, and I thought it was my mother, but there was nobody there. This happened more than once, and always made me afraid, so that I ran home. It was when I was 5 years old that my grandfather made me a bow and some arrows. The grass was young, and I was horseback. A thunderstorm was coming from where the sun goes down, and just as I was riding into the woods along a creek, there was a kingbird sitting on a limb. This was not a dream, it happened, and I was going to shoot at the kingbird with the bow my grandfather made, when the bird spoke and said, "The clouds all over are one-sided." Perhaps it meant that all the clouds were looking at me. And then it said, Listen, a voice is calling you." Then I looked up at the clouds, and two men were coming, head first like arrows slanting down. And as they came, they sang a sacred song, and the thunder was like drumming. I will sing it for you. Behold, a sacred voice is calling you. All over the sky, a sacred voice is calling. But when they were very close to me, they wheeled about toward where the sun goes down, and suddenly they were geese. Then they were gone, and the rain came with a big wind and a roaring. I did not tell this vision to anyone. I like to think about it, but I was afraid to tell it. What happened after that until the summer I was 9 years old is not a story. There were winters and summers, and they were good, for the Washishus had made their iron road along the Platte and traveled there. This had cut the buffalo herd in two, but those that stayed in our country with us were more than could be counted, and we wandered without trouble in our land. Now and then the voices would come back when I was out alone, like someone calling me, but what they wanted me to do I did not know. This did not happen very often, and when it did not happen, I forgot about it. For I was growing taller and was riding horses now, and could shoot prairie chickens and rabbits with my bow. The boys of my people began very young to learn the ways of men, and no one taught us. We just learned by doing what we saw, and we were warriors at a time when boys now are like girls. It was the summer when I was 9 years old that a voice came and said, "It is time. Now they are calling you." The next day I was very sick. Both my legs and both my arms were swollen badly, and my face was all puffed up. I was lying in our teepee, and my mother and father were sitting beside me. I could see out through the opening, and there two men were coming from the clouds, head first like arrows slanting down, and I knew they were the same that I had seen before. They came down and said, "Hurry, come, your grandfathers are calling you." Then they turned and left the ground like arrows slanting upward from the bow. When I got up to follow, my legs did not hurt me anymore, and I was very light. I went outside the teepee, and a little cloud came and stooped and took me flying very fast. And when I looked down, I could see my mother and my father, and I felt sorry to be leaving them. Then there was nothing but the air and the swiftness of the little cloud that bore me, and those two men still leading up to where white clouds were piled like mountains on a wide blue plain, and in them thunder beings lived and leaped and flashed. Now suddenly there was nothing but a world of cloud, and we three were there alone in the middle of a great white plain with snowy hills and mountains staring at us. And it was very still, but there were whispers. Then the two men spoke together, and they said, "Behold him, the being with 4 legs." I looked and saw a bay horse standing there, and he began to speak. "Behold me," he said. "My life history you shall see." Then he wheeled about to where the sun goes down and said, "Behold them, their history you shall know." I looked, and there were 12 black horses, all abreast, with necklaces of buffalo hooves, and they were beautiful, but I was frightened, because their manes were lightning, and there was thunder in their nostrils. Then the bay horse wheeled to where the great white giant lives, and said, "Behold," and there were 12 white horses, all abreast. Their manes were flowing like a blizzard wind, and from their noses came a roaring, and all about them white geese soared and circled. Then the bay wheeled round to where the sun shines continually, and there 12 sorrel horses with necklaces of elk's teeth stood abreast, with eyes that glimmered like the daybreak star and manes of morning light. Then the bay wheeled once again to the place where you are always facing, and there stood 12 buckskins all abreast, with horns upon their heads, and manes that lived and grew like trees and grasses. And when I had seen all these, the bay horse said, Your grandfathers are having a council. These shall take you, so have courage. Make haste, the bay horse said, and we walked together side by side, while the blacks, the whites, the sorrels, and the buckskins followed, marching 4 by 4. Then, as we walked, there was a heaped-up cloud ahead that changed into a teepee, and a rainbow was the open door of it. And through the door I saw 6 old men sitting in a row. And they looked older than men can ever be, old like the hills, like the stars. And the oldest of the grandfathers spoke with a kind voice and said, Come right in and do not fear. Your grandfathers all over the world are having a council, and they have called you here to teach you. His voice was very kind, but I shook all over with fear, for I knew that these were not old men, but the powers of the world. I knew this and was afraid, until the first grandfather spoke again. Behold, where the sun goes down, the thunder beings you shall see, and have from them my power. And they shall take you to the high and lonely center of the earth, that you may see, even to the place where the sun continually shines. They shall take you there to understand. Now there was a wooden cup in his hand, and it was full of water, and in the water was the sky. Take this, he said. It is the power to make live, and it is yours. Now he had a bow in his hands. Take this, he said. It is the power to destroy, and it is yours. Then he pointed to himself and said, Look close at him who is your spirit now, for you are his body, and his name is Eagle Wing Stretches. And saying this, he got up very tall and started running toward where the sun goes down. And suddenly he was a black horse that stopped and turned and looked at me. And the horse was very poor and sick. His ribs stood out. Then the second grandfather, he of the north, arose with a herb of power in his hand and said, Take this and hurry. I took and held it toward the black horse. He fattened and was happy and came prancing to his place, and was the first grandfather sitting there. The second grandfather, he of the north, spoke again. Take courage, younger brother. On earth a nation you shall make live, for yours shall be the power of the white giant's wings, the cleansing wing. And now it was the third grandfather who spoke. He of where the sun shines continually. Take courage, younger brother, he said, for across the earth they shall take you. Then he pointed to where the daybreak star was shining, and beneath the star 2 men were flying. From them you shall have power, he said, from them who have awakened all the beings of the earth, with roots and legs and wings. And as he said this, he held in his hand a sacred chanupa, which had a spotted eagle outstretched upon the stem. And this eagle seemed alive, for it was poised and fluttering, and its eyes were looking at me. With this chanupa, the grandfather said, You shall walk upon the earth, and whatever sickens there you shall make well. And now the fourth grandfather spoke. He of the south, whence comes the power to grow. Younger brother, he said, with the powers of the 4 quarters you shall walk, a relative. Behold the living center of a nation. I shall give you, and with it many you shall save. And I saw that he was holding in his hand a bright red stick that was alive. And as I looked, it sprouted at the top and set forth branches, and on the branches many leaves came out and murmured. And in the leaves the birds began to sing. It shall stand in the center of the nation's circle, said the grandfather, a cane to walk with and a people's heart, and by your powers you shall make it blossom. Then when he had been still a little while, to hear the birds sing, he spoke again. Behold the earth. So I looked down and saw it lying like a hoop of peoples, and in the center bloomed the holy stick that was a tree, and where it stood there crossed two roads, a red one and a black. From where the giant lives to where you always face, the red road goes, the road of good, the grandfather said, and on it shall your nation walk. The black road goes from where the thunder beings live to where the sun continually shines. A fearful road, a road of troubles and of war. On this also you shall walk, and from it you shall have the power to destroy a people's foes. In 4 ascents you shall walk the earth with power. I think he meant that I should see 4 generations counting me, and now I am seeing the 3rd. Now the 5th grandfather spoke, the oldest of them all, the spirit of the sky. My boy, he said, I have sent for you, and you have come. My power you shall see. He stretched his arms and turned into a spotted eagle, hovering. Behold, he said, all the wings of the air shall come to you, and they and the winds and the stars shall be like relatives. You shall go across the earth with my power. Now I knew the 6th grandfather was about to speak. He who was the spirit of the earth, and I saw that he was very old, but more as men are old. I stared at him, for it seemed I knew him somehow, and as I stared he slowly changed, for he was growing backwards into youth, and when he had become a boy, I knew that he was myself, with all the years that would be mine at last. When he was old again, he said, my boy, have courage, for my power shall be yours, and you shall need it, for your nation on the earth will have great troubles. Come. He rose and tottered out through the rainbow door, and I followed on the bay horse. Now you shall walk the black road with ease, and as you walk, all the nations that have roots or legs or wings shall fear you. So I started riding toward the east, down the fearful road, and behind me came the horsebacks 4 abreast, the blacks, the whites, the sorrels, and the buckskins. And far away above the fearful road, the daybreak star was rising very dim. We came above a place where 3 streams made a big one, a source of mighty waters. And something terrible was there. Flames were rising from the water, and in the flames a blue man lived. The dust was floating all about him in the air. The grass was short and withered. The trees were wilting. 2-legged and 4-legged beings lay there, thin and panting, and wings too weak to fly. Then the riders all cried together, Eagle wing stretches, hurry! And all the world was filled with voices of all kinds that cheered me. So I charged down upon the blue man. I had the cup of water in one hand, and in the other was the bow that turned into a spear as the bay and I swooped down. And the spear's head was sharp lightning. It stabbed the blue man's heart, and as it struck I could hear the thunder rolling and many voices that cried, Unhe, meaning I had killed. The flames died. The trees and grasses were not withered anymore, and murmured happily together, and every living thing cried in gladness with whatever voice it had. You see, I had been riding with the storm clouds and had come to earth as rain, and it was the drought that I had killed with the power that the 6th grandfather gave me. So we were riding on the earth now, down along the river, flowing full from the source of waters, and soon I saw ahead the circled village of a people in the valley. And a voice said, Behold, a nation, it is yours. Make haste, eagle wing stretches. Behold the circle of the nations hoop, for it is holy, being endless, and thus all powers shall be one power in the people without end. Now they shall break camp and go forth upon the red road, and your grandfathers shall walk with them. So the people broke camp and took the good road, with the white wing on their faces. And as we went, the voice behind me said, Behold, a good nation walking in a Wakan manner in a good land. Then I looked up and saw that there were 4 ascents ahead, and these were generations I should know. Now we were on the first ascent, and all the land was green. Then we started on the second ascent, marching as before, and still the land was green, but it was getting steeper. And as I looked ahead, the people changed into elks and buffalo, and all 4-footed beings, and even into fowls, all walking in a Wakan manner on the good red road together. And I myself was a spotted eagle soaring over them. Then all the marching animals grew restless and afraid that they were not what they had been, and began sending forth voices of trouble, calling to their chiefs. I saw that leaves were falling from the Wakan tree, and the voice said, Behold your nation, and remember what your 6 grandfathers gave you, for thenceforth your people walk in difficulties. Then the people broke camp again, and saw the black road before them, towards where the sun goes down, and black clouds coming, and they did not want to go, but could not stay. And as they walked the third ascent, all the animals and fowls that were the people ran here and there, for each one seemed to have his own little vision that he followed and his own rules. And all over the universe I could hear the winds at war like wild beasts fighting. And when we reached the summit of the third ascent and camped, the nation's hoop was broken. Then when the people were getting ready to begin the fourth ascent, I looked down. The people were all changed back to human, and they were thin, their faces sharp, for they were starving. Their ponies were only hide and bones, and the Wakan tree was gone. I saw a sacred man who was painted red all over, and he lay down and rolled, and when he got up, it was a fat buffalo standing there. And where the buffalo stood, a sacred herb sprang up. The herb grew and bore 4 blossoms on a single stem, while I was looking, a blue, a white, a scarlet, and a yellow, and the bright rays of these flashed to the heavens. I know now what this meant, that the buffalo were the gift of a good spirit and were our strength. But we should lose them, and from the same good spirit we must find another strength. For the people all seemed better when the herb had grown and blossomed. Now I was on my bay horse again, because the horse is of the earth, and it was there my power would be used. Then a voice said, Behold this day, for it is yours to make. Now you shall stand upon the center of the earth and see, for there they are taking you. The riders of the west, the north, the east, the south, took me to the highest mountain of them all, and around about beneath me was the whole hoop of the world. And while I stood there, I saw more than I could tell, and I understood more than I saw. For I was seeing in a Wakan manner the shapes of all things in the spirit, and the shape of all shapes as they must live together, like one being. And I saw that the Wakan hoop of my people was one of many hoops that made one circle, wide as daylight and as starlight, and in the center grew one mighty flowering tree, to shelter all the children of one mother and one father. And I saw that it was Wakan. Now 2 men were leading me, head first like arrows slanting upward, the 2 that brought me from the earth. Then I saw ahead the rainbow, flaming above the teepee, and I saw the 6 grandfathers sitting in a row, with their arms held toward me and their hands palms out. He has triumphed, cried the 6 together, making thunder, and as I passed before them, each gave again the gift that he had given me before, the cup of water and the bow and arrows, the power to make live and to destroy, the white wing of cleansing and the healing herb, the Wakan Chanupa, the flowering stick, and each one spoke in turn from west to south, explaining what he gave as he had done before, and as each one spoke, he melted down into the earth and rose again, and as each did this, I felt nearer to the earth. Then the oldest of them all said, "Grandson, all over the universe you have seen. Now you shall go back with the power to the place from whence you came, and it shall happen that hundreds shall be Wakan, hundreds shall be flames. Behold." I looked below and saw my people there, and all were well and happy except one, and he was lying like the dead, and that one was myself. Then the oldest grandfather sang his song. There is someone lying on earth in a Wakan manner. There is someone on earth he lies. In a Wakan manner I have made him to walk. Now the teepee, built and roofed with cloud, began to sway back and forth as in a wind, and the flaming rainbow door was growing dimmer. I could hear voices of all kinds crying from outside. "Eagle Wing stretches is coming forth, behold him." And as I walked alone, I heard the sun singing, and as it rose, it sang like this. With visible face I am appearing, in a Wakan manner I appear. For the greening earth a pleasantness I make, the center of the nation's hoop I have made pleasant. The four-leggeds, the two-leggeds, I have made them to walk. The wings of the air I have made them to fly. With visible face I appear. My day I have made it Wakan. I was all alone on a broad plain, with my feet upon the earth, alone but for the spotted eagle guarding me. I could see my people's village far ahead, and I walked very fast, for I was homesick now. Then I saw my own teepee, and inside I saw my mother and my father, bending over a sick boy. That was myself. And as I entered the teepee, someone was saying, "The boy is coming too. You had better give him some water." Then I was sitting up, and I was sad because my mother and my father didn't seem to know I had been so far away. When I got back to my father and mother and was sitting up there in our teepee, my face was still all puffed and my legs and arms were badly swollen. But I felt good all over and wanted to get right up and run around. My parents would not let me. They told me I had been sick 12 days, lying like dead all the while, and that whirlwind chaser, who was Standing Bear's uncle and a medicine man, had brought me back to life. I knew it was the grandfathers of the flaming rainbow teepee who had cured me, but I felt afraid to say so. Everybody was glad that I was living, but as I lay there thinking about the wonderful place where I had been and all that I had seen, I was very sad, for it seemed to me that everybody ought to know about it, but I was afraid to tell, because I knew that nobody would believe me, little as I was, for I was only 9 years old. Also, and as I lay there thinking of my vision, I could see it all again and feel the meaning with a part of me like a strange power glowing in my body. But when the part of me that talks would try to make words for the meaning, it would be like fog and get away from me. I am sure now that I was then too young to understand it all, and that I only felt it. It was the pictures I remembered and the words that went with them, and even now I know that more was shown to me than I can tell. That evening of the day when I came back, Whirlwind Chaser, who had got a great name and a good horse for curing me, came over to our teepee. He sat down and looked at me a long time in a strange way, and then he said to my father, "Your boy there is sitting in a Wakan manner. I do not know what it is, but there is something special for him to do. For just as I came in, I could see a power, like a light, all through his body." While he was looking hard at me, I wanted to get up and run away, for I was afraid he might look right into me and see my vision and tell it wrong. and then maybe all the people would think that I was crazy. The next morning, all the swelling had left my face and legs and arms, and I felt well as ever. But everything around me seemed strange, and as though it were far away. I remember that for 12 days after that I wanted to be alone, and it seemed I did not belong to my people. They were almost like strangers. I would be out alone away from the village and the other boys, and I would look around to the four quarters, thinking of my vision and wishing I could get back there again. One day during this time, I was out with the bow and arrows my grandfather had made for me, and as I walked along thinking of my vision, suddenly I felt funny. And for a little while it seemed that the bow and arrows were those that the first grandfather and the flaming rainbow teepee had given me. Then they were only those that Refused to Go had made, and I felt foolish and tried to make myself think it was all only a dream anyway. So I thought I would forget about it and shoot something. There was a bush and a little bird sitting in it. But just as I was going to shoot, I felt funny again and remembered that I was to be like a relative with the birds, so I did not shoot. Then I went on down toward a creek, feeling foolish because I had let the little bird go. And when I saw a green frog sitting there, I just shot him right away. But when I picked him up by the legs, I thought, now I have killed him, and it made me want to cry. We went on a big hunt after we had been at Willow Creek a while, and it helped me to quit thinking about my vision all the time. Everybody began sharpening knives and arrows and getting the best horses ready for the great making of meat. Then we started for where the buffalo were. The soldier band went first, riding 20 abreast, and everybody who dared go ahead of them would get knocked off his horse. They kept order, and everybody had to obey. After them came the hunters, riding 5 abreast. The people came up in the rear. Then the head man of the advisors went around picking out the best hunters with the fastest horses. And to these he said, "Good young warriors, my relatives, your work I know is good. What you do is good always. So today you shall feed the helpless. Perhaps there are some old and feeble people without sons, or some who have little children and no man. You shall help these, and whatever you kill shall be theirs." This was a great honor for a young man. Then when we had come near to where the buffalo were, the hunters circled around them, and the cry went up as in a battle, "Hukkahay!" which meant to charge. Then there was a great dust, and everybody shouted, and all the hunters went in to kill, every man for himself. Everybody was very happy.
Standing Bear speaks.
I remember that hunt, for before that time I had only killed a calf. I was 13 years old and supposed to be a man, so I made up my mind I'd get a yearling. I think I hit his heart, for he began to wobble as he ran, and blood came out of his nose. Hunters cried, "Yoo-ho!" once when they killed. But this was my first big buffalo, and I just kept on yelling, "Yoo-ho!" People must have thought I was killing a whole herd the way I yelled. When the butchering was all over, they hung the meat across the horses' backs and fastened it with strips of fresh buffalo hide. On the way back to the village, all the hunting horses were loaded, and we little boys who could not wait for the feast helped ourselves to all the raw liver we wanted. Nobody got cross when we did this. Then the women were all busy, cutting the meat into strips and hanging it on racks to dry. You could see red meat hanging everywhere. The people feasted all night long and danced and sang. Those were happy times. After all the meat was dried, the 6 bands of our nation that had come together about the time when the great vision came to me broke camp at the mouth of Willow Creek. and scattered in all directions. A small part of our band, the Ogalalas, started south for the soldiers' town on Smoky Earth River. For some of our relatives were there, and we wanted to see them and have a feast of brown bread, the black medicine called coffee, and sugar, the white juice of the tree. All the rest of the Ogalalas stayed in that country with Crazy Horse, who would have nothing to do with the Washishus. This was late in the moon when the cherries are ripe, and we boys had a good time playing. There were not many boys in our small band, and we all played together. I had quit thinking about my vision. The funny feeling had left me, and I was not bashful anymore. But whenever a thunderstorm was coming, I felt happy, as though somebody was coming to visit me. When we got to Warbonnet Creek, which is not very far from the soldiers' town, my aunt and other relatives were there waiting for us with bread and coffee, and we had a big feast. I was sick all that night, and the next day my parents made me ride on a pony drag, because they were afraid I would surely die this time, but I think it was only too much bread and coffee. I was 10 years old that winter, and that was the first time I ever saw a Washishu. At first, I thought they all looked sick, and I was afraid they might just begin to fight at any time, but I got used to them. From there, we moved on to Buffalo Gap at the foot of the hills, and my father and I went out alone to look for deer. We climbed up through the timber to the top of a big hill. When we were on top, my father looked down and said, "There they are. You stay here. I will go around them." Then the funny feeling came back, and I said without knowing why I said it, "Father, stay here, for they are bringing them to us." He looked at me hard and said, "Who is bringing them?" I could not answer, and after he had looked hard at me again, he said, "All right, son." So we lay down there in the grass and waited. They did come to us, and my father got 2 of them. That was another happy summer, for the big trouble had not come yet. We cut plenty of teepee poles up along the creeks that came down the east side of the Black Hills, and there was all we wanted to eat, for the hills were like a big food pack for our people. There was a man by the name of Watanye who liked me a good deal. He often liked to tell me stories, mostly funny ones. I still remember one story he told me about a young Lakota called High Horse, and what a hard time he had getting the girl he wanted. Watanya said the story happened just as he told it, and maybe it did. If it did not, it could have, just as well as not. I will tell that story now. High Horse's courting. You know, in the old days, it was not so very easy to get a girl when you wanted to be married. Sometimes it was hard work for a young man, and he had to stand a great deal. Say I am a young man and I have seen a young girl who looks so beautiful to me that I feel all sick when I think about her. I cannot just go and tell her about it and then get married if she is willing. I have to be a very sneaky fellow to talk to her at all, and after I have managed to talk to her, that is only the beginning. Well, this young man I am telling about was called High Horse, and there was a girl in the village who looked so beautiful to him that he was just sick all over from thinking about her so much, and he was getting sicker all the time. The girl was very shy, and her parents thought a great deal of her because they were not young anymore, and this was the only child they had. They thought so much of her that they had made a rawhide bed for her to sleep in, and after they knew that High Horse was sneaking around after her, they took rawhide thongs and tied the girl in bed at night so that nobody could steal her when they were asleep. For they were not sure, but that their girl might really want to be stolen. Well, after High Horse had been sneaking around a good while and hiding and waiting for the girl and getting sicker all the time, he finally caught her alone and made her talk to him. Then he found out that she liked him maybe a little. Of course, this did not make him feel well. It made him sicker than ever. But now he felt as brave as a buffalo bull, and so he went right to her father and said he loved the girl so much that he would give 2 good horses for her, one of them young and the other one not so very old. But the old man just waved his hand, meaning for High Horse to go away and quit talking foolishness like that. Then High Horse went back to the old man and said he would give 4 horses for the girl, 2 of them young and the other 2 not hardly old at all. But the old man just waved his hand and would not say anything. So High Horse sneaked around until he could talk to the girl again, and he asked her to run away with him. He told her he thought he would just fall over and die if she did not. But she said she would not do that. She wanted to be bought like a fine woman. You see, she thought a great deal of herself, too. That made High Horse feel very sick that he could not eat a bite, and he went around with his head hanging down as though he might just fall down and die any time. Red Deer was another young fellow, and he and High Horse were great friends, always doing things together. He said, "Cousin, I have a plan, and if you are man enough to do as I tell you, then everything will be all right. She will not run away with you. Her old man will not take 4 horses, and 4 horses are all you can get. You must steal her and run away with her. Then, after a while, you can come back, and the old man cannot do anything, because she will be your woman. Probably she wants you to steal her anyway." So this is what they did. They went away from the village alone, and Red Deer made High Horse strip naked. Then he painted High Horse solid white all over, and after that he painted black stripes all over the white and put black rings around High Horse's eyes. High Horse looked terrible. He looked so terrible that when Red Deer was through painting and took a good look at what he had done, he said it scared even him a little. So this is what they did. That night, late, they sneaked up to the girl's teepee and waited until it sounded inside as though the old man and the old woman and the girl were sound asleep. Then High Horse crawled under the teepee with a knife. He had to cut the rawhide thongs first, and then Red Deer, who was pulling up the stakes around that side of the teepee, was going to help drag the girl outside and gag her. After that, High Horse could put her across his pony in front of him and hurry out of there and be happy all the rest of his life. When High Horse had crawled inside, he felt so nervous that he could hear his heart drumming, and it seemed so loud he felt sure it would waken the old folks. But it did not, and after a while, he began cutting the thongs. Every time he cut one, it made a pop and nearly scared him to death. But he was getting along all right, and all the thongs were cut down as far as the girl's thighs, when he became so nervous that his knife slipped and struck the girl. She gave a big loud yell, then the old folks jumped up and yelled too. By this time, High Horse was outside, and he and Red Deer were running away like antelope. The old man and some other people chased the young men, but they got away in the dark, and nobody knew who it was. Well, if you ever wanted a beautiful girl, you will know how sick High Horse was now. It was very bad the way he felt, and it looked as though he would starve even if he did not drop over dead sometime. Red Deer kept thinking about this, and after a few days he went to High Horse and said, "Cousin, take courage. I have another plan, and I am sure if you are man enough, we can steal her this time." And High Horse said, "I am man enough to do anything anybody can think up, if I can only get that girl." So when the night was getting old and everybody was sound asleep, they sneaked back to the girl's teepee. High Horse crawled in with his knife as before, and Red Deer waited outside. High Horse crept up by the girl's bed and began to cut the rawhide thongs. But he must have made some noise, for suddenly the old woman awoke and said to her old man, "Old man, wake up, there is somebody in this teepee." But the old man was sleepy and didn't want to be bothered. He said, "Of course there is somebody in this teepee. Go to sleep and don't bother me." Then he snored some more. But High Horse was so scared by now that he lay very still and as flat to the ground as he could. Now, you see, he had not been sleeping very well for a long time, because he was so sick about the girl. And while he was lying there waiting for the old woman to snore, he just forgot everything, even how beautiful the girl was. Red Deer, who was lying outside ready to do his part, wondered and wondered what had happened in there, but he did not dare call out to High Horse. After a while, the day began to break, and Red Deer had to leave with the 2 ponies he had staked there for his friend and girl, or somebody would see them. So he left. Now when it was getting light in the teepee, the girl awoke, and the first thing she saw was a terrible animal, all white with black stripes on it, lying asleep beside her bed. So she screamed, and then the old woman screamed, and the old man yelled. High Horse jumped up, scared almost to death, and he nearly knocked the teepee down getting out of there. People were coming, running from all over the village with guns and bows and axes, and everybody was yelling. By now, High Horse was running so fast that he hardly touched the ground at all, and he looked so terrible that the people fled from him and let him run. Some braves wanted to shoot at him, but the others said he might be some sacred being and it would bring bad trouble to kill him. High Horse made for the river that was near, and in among the brush he found a hollow tree and dived into it. That morning the people were ordered to break camp and move away from there, so they did, while High Horse was hiding in his hollow tree. Now Red Deer had been watching all this from his own teepee and trying to look as though he were as much surprised and scared as all the others. So when the camp moved, he sneaked back to where he had seen his friend disappear. When he was down there in the bush, he called, and High Horse answered because he knew his friend's voice. They washed off the paint from High Horse and sat down on the river bank to talk about their troubles. High Horse said he never would go back to the village as long as he lived, and he did not care what happened to him now. He said he was going to go on the warpath all by himself. Red Deer said, "No, Tashi, you are not going on the warpath alone, because I am going with you." So Red Deer got everything ready, and at night they started out on the warpath all alone. After several days they came to a crow camp just about sundown, and when it was dark they sneaked up to where the crow horses were grazing, killed the horse guard, who was not thinking about enemies because he thought all the Lakotas were far away, and drove off about 100 horses. They got a big start because all the crow horses stampeded, and it was probably morning before the crow warriors could catch any horses to ride. Red Deer and High Horse fled with their herd 3 days and nights before they reached the village of their people. Then they drove the whole herd right into the village and up in front of the girl's teepee. The old man was there, and High Horse called out to him and asked if he thought maybe that would be enough horses for his girl. The old man did not wave him away that time. It was not the horses that he wanted. What he wanted was a son who was a real man and good for something. So High Horse got his girl after all, and I think he deserved her. It was the next summer, when I was 11 years old, that the first sign of a new trouble came to us. One evening, just before sunset, a big thundercloud came up from the west, and just before the wind struck, there were clouds of split-tailed swallows flying all around above us. It was like a part of my vision, and it made me feel funny. The boys tried to hit the swallows with stones, and it hurt me to see them doing this, but I could not tell them. I got a stone and acted as though I were going to throw, but I did not. The swallows seemed wakan. Nobody hit one, and when I thought about this, I knew that of course they could not. The next day, some of the people were building a sweat teepee for a medicine man by the name of Chips, who was going to perform a ceremony and had to be purified first. While they were heating the stones for the sweat teepee, some boys asked me to go with them to shoot squirrels. We went out, and when I was about to shoot at one, I felt very uneasy all at once. So I sat down, feeling funny, and wondered about it. While I sat there, I heard a voice that said, "Go at once, go home." I told the boys we must go home at once, and we all hurried. When we got back, everybody was excited, breaking camp, catching the ponies, and loading the drags. And I heard that while Chips was in the sweat teepee, a voice had told him that the band must flee at once because something was going to happen there. It was nearly sundown when we started, and we fled until we reached the mouth of Horse Creek. We were going to stay there, but scouts came to us and said that many soldiers had come into the Black Hills, and that was what Chip saw while he was in the sweat teepee. So we hurried on in the night towards Smoky Earth River. Afterward, I learned that it was Pahushka who had led his soldiers into the Black Hills that summer to see what he could find. Our people knew there was yellow metal in little chunks up there, but they did not bother with it because it was not good for anything. We stayed all winter at the soldiers' town, and all the while the bad trouble was coming fast. For in the fall we heard that some Wasishus had come from the Missouri River to dig in the Black Hills for the yellow metal, because Pahushka had told about it with a voice that went everywhere. Later he got rubbed out for doing that. Our people at the soldiers' town thought we ought to get together and do something. Red Cloud's people said that the soldiers had gone in there to keep the diggers out, but we, who were only visiting, did not believe it. We called Red Cloud's people hangs around the fort, and our people said they were standing up for the Wasishus, and if we did not do something, we should lose the Black Hills. In the spring, when I was 12 years old, more soldiers with many wagons came up from the soldiers' town at the mouth of the Laramie River and went into the hills. In the moon, when the calves grow hair, there was a big council with the Wasishus on the Smoky Earth River at the mouth of White Clay Creek. I can remember the council, but I did not understand much of it then. Many of the Lakotas were there, also Sheilas and Blue Clouds, but Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull stayed away. They talked and talked for days, but it was like wind blowing in the end. My father told me that the grandfather at Washington wanted to lease the Black Hills so that the Wasishus could dig yellow metal, and that the chief of the soldiers had said if we did not do this, the Black Hills will be just like melting snow held in our hands, because the Wasishus would take that country anyway. After the council, we heard that creeks of Wasishus were flowing into the hills and becoming rivers, and that they were already making towns up there. It looked like bad trouble coming, so our band broke camp and started out to join Crazy Horse on Powder River. There were some hang around the fort people with us, and when they saw that we were going to join Crazy Horse, they left us and started back to the soldiers' town. They were afraid there might be trouble, and they knew Crazy Horse would fight. So they wanted to be safe with the Wasishus, who did not like them very much. I was anxious to see my cousin, Crazy Horse, again, for now that it began to look like bad trouble coming, everybody talked about him more than ever, and he seemed greater than before. Also, I was getting older. Of course, I had seen him now and then ever since I could remember, and had heard stories of the brave things he did. Crazy Horse became a chief because of the power he got in a vision when he was a boy. When I was a man, my father told me something about that vision. Of course, he did not know all of it, but he said that Crazy Horse dreamed and went into the world where there is nothing but the spirits of all things. He was on his horse in that world, and the horse and himself on it. And the trees and the grass and the stones had everything, were made of spirit, and nothing was hard, and everything seemed to float. His horse was standing still there, and yet it danced around like a horse made only of shadow, and that is how he got his name, which does not mean that his horse was crazy or wild, but that in his vision it danced around in that funny way. It was this vision that gave him his great power, for when he went into a fight, he had only to think of that world, to be in it again, so that he could go through anything and not be hurt. Until he was murdered by the Wasishus at the soldiers' town on White River, he was wounded only twice, once by accident and both times by someone of his own people, when he was not expecting trouble and was not thinking, never by an enemy. He was 15 years old when he was wounded by accident, and the other time was when he was a young man and another man was jealous of him because the man's wife liked Crazy Horse. We did not stay together there very long, but scattered out and camped in different places so that the people and the ponies would all have plenty. Crazy Horse kept his village on Powder River with about 100 teepees, and our band made camp on the tongue. During the winter, runners came from the Washishus and told us we must come into the soldiers' town right away or there would be bad trouble. But it was foolish to say that, because it was very cold and many of our people and ponies would have died in the snow. Also, we were in our own country and were doing no harm. Late in the moon of the dark red calves, our little band started for the soldiers' town. Crazy Horse stayed with about 100 teepees on Powder. And in the middle of the moon of the snowblind, something bad happened. It was just daybreak. There was a blizzard and it was very cold. The people were sleeping. Suddenly, there were many shots and horses galloping through the village. It was the cavalry of the Washishus, and they were yelling and shooting and riding their horses against the teepees. All the people rushed out and ran because they were not awake yet and they were frightened. The soldiers killed as many women and children and men as they could while the people were running toward a bluff. Then they set fire to some of the teepees and knocked the others down. But when the people were on the side of the bluff, Crazy Horse said something, and all the warriors began singing the death song and charged back upon the soldiers. And the soldiers ran, driving many of the people's ponies ahead of them. Crazy Horse followed them all that day with a band of warriors, and that night he took all the stolen ponies away from them and some of their own horses and brought them all back to the village. We stayed at the soldiers' town this time until the grass was good in the moon when the ponies shed. Then my father told me we were going back to Crazy Horse and that we were going to have to fight from then on because there was no other way to keep our country. He said that Red Cloud was a cheap man and wanted to sell the Black Hills to the Washishus, that Spotted Tail and other chiefs were cheap men too, and that the hang around the fort people were all cheap and would stand up for the Washishus. My aunt, who was living at the soldiers' town, must have felt the way we did, because when we broke camp, she gave me a 6-shooter like the soldiers had and told me I was a man now. I was 13 years old and not very big for my age, but I thought I should have to be a man anyway. We were a small band and we started in the night and traveled fast. Before we got to Warbonnet Creek, some Sheilas joined us because their hearts were bad like ours and they were going to the same place. Later, I learned that many small bands were doing the same thing and coming together from everywhere. Just after we camped on the Warbonnet, our scouts saw a wagon train of the Washishus coming up the old road. They shot at our scouts and we decided we would attack them. When the Washishus saw us coming, they put their wagons in a circle and got inside with their oxen. We rode around and around them in a wide circle that kept getting narrower. While we were riding around the wagons, we were hanging low on the outside of the ponies and shooting under their necks. This was not easy to do, even when your legs were long, and mine were not yet very long, but I stuck tight and shot with the 6-shooter my aunt gave me. Before we started the attack, I was afraid, but Big Man told us we were brave boys, and I soon got over being frightened. The Washishus shot fast at us from behind the wagons, and I could hear bullets whizzing, but they did not hit any of us. I kept thinking of my vision, and maybe that helped. I do not know whether we killed any Washishus or not. We rode around several times, and once we got close, but there were not many of us, and we could not get at the Washishus behind their wagons, so we went away. This was my first fight. We were traveling very fast now, for we were in danger and wanted to get back to Crazy Horse. And as we traveled, we met other little bands, all going to the same place until there were a good many of us all mixed up before we got there. When we came to the ridge on this side of the Rosebud River, we could see the valley full of teepees, and the ponies could not be counted. Many people were there: Ogalalas, Hunkpapas, Minakanju, Sans-Arcs, Blackfeet, Broads, Santis, and Yankatonas. Also, many Sheelas and Blue Clouds had come to fight with us. The village was long, and you could not see all the camps with one look. About the middle of the moon of making fat, some of our scouts came in from the south, and the crier went around the circle and said, "The scouts have returned, and they have reported that soldiers are camping up the river. So, young warriors, take courage and get ready to meet them." While they were all getting ready, I was getting ready too, because Crazy Horse was going to lead the warriors, and I wanted to go with him. But my uncle, who thought a great deal of me, said, "Young nephew, you must not go. Look at the helpless ones. Stay home, and maybe there will be plenty of fighting right here." So the war parties went out without me. Maybe my uncle thought I was too little to do much and might get killed. Crazy Horse whipped the cavalry of 3 Stars when they attacked his village on the Powder that cold morning in the moon of the snowblind. Then he moved further west to the Rosebud, and when the soldiers came to kill us there, he whipped them and made them go back. Then he moved further west to the valley of the Greasy Grass. We were in our own country all the time, and we only wanted to be left alone. The soldiers came there to kill us, and many got rubbed out. It was our country, and we did not want to have trouble. Father told me all the fighting had not done any good, because the hang around the fort people were getting ready to sell the Black Hills to the Washishu, and that more soldiers were coming to fight us. He said that 3 Stars was on Goose Creek, and that many other soldiers were up on the Yellowstone, and that these would come together and have us between them. We moved over to the Tongue River and camped a little while. Then we started east, and the soldiers of 3 Stars followed us. Our people set fire to the grass behind us as we went, and the smoke back there was wide as a day, and the light of the fire was wide as the nights. This was to make the soldiers' horses starve. Then it began to rain, and it kept on raining for days while we traveled east. Our ponies had to work hard in the deep mud, and it must have been bad for the soldiers' horses back there with nothing to eat. Sitting Bull and Gall with some people left us and started for grandmother's land, and other people were going away from us all the time. But Crazy Horse would not leave the country that was ours. Wherever we went, the soldiers came to kill us, and it was all our own country. It was ours already when the Washishus made the treaty with Red Cloud that said it would be ours as long as grass should grow and water flow. That was only 8 winters before, and they were chasing us now because we remembered and they forgot. After that, we started west again, and we were not happy anymore because so many of our people had untied their horses' tails and gone over to the Washishus. We went back deep into our country, and most of the land was black from the fire, and the buffalo had gone away. We camped on the Tongue River, where there were some cottonwood for the ponies, and a hard winter came on early. It snowed much. Game was hard to find, and it was a hungry time for us. Ponies died, and we ate them. There had been thousands of us together that summer, but there were not 2,000 now. News came to us there in the moon of the falling leaves that the Black Hills had been sold to the Washishus, and also all the country west of the hills, the country we were in then. I learned when I was older that our people did not want to do this. The Washishus went to some of the chiefs alone and got them to put their marks on the treaty. Maybe some of them did this when they were crazy from drinking the miniwakan the Washishus gave them. I have heard this, I do not know, but only crazy or very foolish men would sell their Mother Earth. Sometimes I think it might have been better if we had stayed together and made them kill us all. Dull Knife was camping with his band of Sheilas on Willow Creek on the edge of the Big Horn Mountains, and one morning, very early, near the end of the moon of falling leaves, the soldiers came there to kill them. The people were all sleeping, the snow was deep, and it was very cold. They could not whip the soldiers, but those who were not killed and did not die from the cold got away and came to our camp on the tongue. They had almost nothing, and some of them had died on the way. Many little babies died. We could give them clothing, but of food we could not give them much, for we were eating ponies when they died. And after a while they left us and started for the soldiers' town on White River to surrender to the Washishus. And so we were all alone there in that country that was ours and had been stolen from us. It was a very bad winter for us, and we were all sad. It was so cold that the sun made himself fires, and we were eating our starving ponies. Late in the moon of the dark red calf, or early in the moon of the snowblind, Spotted Tail, the Brole, and some others came to us. His sister was Crazy Horse's mother. He was a great chief and a great warrior before he went over to the Washishus. I saw him, and I did not like him. He was fat with Washishu food, and we were lean with famine. My father told me that he came to make his nephew surrender to the soldiers. I could not understand this, and I thought much about it. How could men get fat by being bad and starve by being good? I thought and thought about my vision, and it made me very sad, for I wondered if maybe it was only a funny dream after all. And then I heard that we would all go into the soldiers' town when the grass should appear, and that Crazy Horse had untied his pony's tail and would not fight again. In the moon of the grass appearing, our little band started for the soldiers' town ahead of the others, and it was early in the moon when the ponies shed that Crazy Horse came in with the rest of our people, and the ponies that were only skin and bones. There were soldiers and Lakota policemen in lines all around him when he surrendered there at the soldiers' town. I saw him take off his war bonnet. He did not talk loud, and he said only a few words, and then he sat down. I was 14 years old. We had enough to eat now, and we boys could play without being afraid of anything. One night early, in the moon when the calf grows hair, we broke camp there at Red Cloud Agency without making any noise and started. My father told me we were going to Spotted Tail's camp, but he did not tell me why until later. We traveled most of the night and then we camped. After what happened, my father told me why Crazy Horse had done this. He was afraid somebody might start trouble down there where all the soldiers were, and the Washishus had taken our guns away from us, so that we could do nothing if there was bad trouble. Afterwards, the hang around the fort people said that he was getting ready to tie up his horse's tail again and make war on the Washishus. How could he do that when we had no guns and could not get any? It was a story the Washishus told, and their tongues were forked when they said it. Our people believe they did what they did because he was a great man and they could not kill him in battle, and he would not make himself over into a Washishu. That summer, my father told me the Washishus wanted him to go to Washington to see the Great Father there, but he would not go. He told them that he did not need to go looking for his Great Father. He said, "My Father is with me, and there is no Great Father between me and the Great Spirit." In the evening of the next day, after we got back to Red Cloud's agency, some soldiers came there, bringing Crazy Horse with them to the soldiers' town, and my father and I went along with many others to see what they were going to do. When we got over there, we could not see Crazy Horse because there were soldiers and Lakota policemen all around where he was and people crowding outside. Then I heard a loud cry in our own language, and it said, "Don't touch me, I am Crazy Horse." And suddenly something went through all the people, like a big wind that strikes many trees all at once. Then everything got quiet, and everybody seemed to be waiting for something. But it was not long until we all knew what had happened in there, and I will tell you how it was. They told Crazy Horse they would not harm him if he would go to the soldiers' town and have a talk with the Washishu chief there. But they lied. They did not take him to the chief for a talk. They took him to the little prison with iron bars on the windows, for they had planned to get rid of him. And when he saw what they were doing, he turned around and took a knife out of his robe and started out against all those soldiers. Then Little Big Man, who had been his friend, took hold of Crazy Horse from behind and tried to get the knife away. And while they were struggling, a soldier ran a bayonet into Crazy Horse from one side at the back, and he fell down and began to die. The soldiers stood all around there and would not let anybody in and made the people go away. My father and I went back to our camp at Red Cloud Agency. That night, I heard mourning all over the camp. Crazy Horse was dead. He was brave and good and wise. He never wanted anything but to save his people, and he fought the Washishus only when they came to kill us in our own country. He was only 30 years old. They could not kill him in battle. They had to lie to him and kill him that way. I cried all night, and so did my father. Our people were all sad because Crazy Horse was dead, and now they were going to pen us up in little islands and make us be like Washishus. So before we had gone very far, some of us broke away and started for the country where we used to be happy. We kept on traveling north, and we went fast because we wanted to be with our relatives under Sitting Bull and Gall in grandmother's land. It was very cold before we foraged Clay Creek where our relatives were, but they were glad to see us and took care of us. They had made plenty of meat, for there were many buffalo in that country, and it was a good winter. The soldiers could not come to kill us there. I was 15 years old that winter, and I thought much of my vision and wondered when my duty was to come. But I could say nothing about this to anyone because I was only a boy, and people would think I was foolish and say, "What can you do if even Sitting Bull can do nothing?" When the grasses appeared again, we went buffalo hunting, and I was big enough now to hunt with the men. My uncle, Running Horse, and I were out together alone one day. I said to my uncle, "I have a funny feeling, and I think something is going to happen soon. I will watch while you kill a buffalo, and we will make quick work of it and go." He looked at me in a strange way a while, then he said, "How?" and started after a buffalo. I held my horses and watched. When he had killed a fat cow, I went to help him butcher. Then I heard a voice that said, "Go at once and look." I told Running Horse I would go to the top of the hill and see what was there. So I rode up and saw 2 Lakota hunters galloping after a buffalo across a valley toward some bluffs. Then I heard some fast shooting over there, then many horses' hooves. Then I saw a band of about 50 horsebacks coming out from behind the bluff where the 2 hunters had disappeared. They were crows, and afterward we learned that they had killed the 2 hunters. So my uncle and I took as much meat as we could and rode fast back to our village and told the others. This showed that my power was growing, and I was glad. In the moon of making fat, we went hunting again. A man by the name of Irontail was with me this time, and we were out alone. I killed a big fat buffalo cow, and we were butchering when a thunderstorm was coming up. Then it began to pour rain, and I heard a voice in the clouds that said, "Make haste, before the day is out, something will happen." Of course, when I heard this, I was excited and told Irontail I had heard a voice in the clouds and that we must hurry up and go. We left everything but the fat of the cow and fled. When we got to the camp of our little band, we were excited and told our people we must flee, so they broke camp and started. Just then a big band of crows came charging, and there were so many of them that we could not hold them off, and we had to flee, shooting back at them as they came after us. The voice in the clouds had told the truth, and it seemed that my power was growing stronger all the time. We stayed on Clay Creek in grandmother's land all that summer, and the next winter when I was 16 years old. That was a very cold winter. There were many blizzards. Game was hard to find, and after a while, the papa that we had made in the summer was all eaten. It looked as though we might starve to death if we did not find some game soon. And everybody was downhearted. Little hunting parties went out in different directions, but it is bad hunting in blizzard weather. We began to feel homesick for our own country, where we used to be happy. The old people talked much about it and the good days before the trouble came. Sometimes I felt like crying when they did that. When the grasses were showing their tender faces again, 2 families of us started for our own country, where we used to be happy. We had only 5 horses among us, because all the others had died in the cold, and we traveled on foot. After a while, we came to All Gone Tree Creek. We camped, and I thought I would take the horses out to eat where the grass was good. But when I had gone only a little way, all of a sudden, the funny feeling came again, and I heard a voice that said, "Be careful and watch. Something you shall see." The voice was so clear that I looked around to see who was there, and nobody was there. So I sat down to think about it. There was a tall bluff a little way from the camp, and it had 2 points on it. So I went over there and climbed to one of the tops where there were some big rocks scattered around. I lay down in those rocks and looked all around, but I could see nothing, and I began to wonder if I was only funny in thinking I had heard a voice. Then I looked over to the other point of the bluff, not far away, and there were 2 men crawling up toward the top on their bellies. I knew they were enemies, and I thought they were crows. But later I learned that they were Blackfeet. I lay as flat as I could and peeped around a rock at the 2 men. They were so near that I could have thrown a rock over there, and I thought if I only had my gun, I could kill them both. They peeped over at our teepees in the valley. I could hear them talking now, and I knew they were planning how to attack us. After a little while, they crawled down backwards a short way, then got up and ran downhill and disappeared. When they were gone, I sat down and thought of my vision and began to pray to the spirits. I said, "Grandfathers, something may happen to me, but I will depend on the power you have given me. Hear me and help me." Then I ran over to our teepees and told the people we must flee at once, because I have seen enemies planning to attack. We were so small a party that we did not dare wait to take our teepees down, so we started right away and traveled very fast. As we fled east, a thundercloud came from the west behind us, and I knew it was coming to protect us. I could hear the thunder beings crying, "Hey, hey!" The cloud stood over us and did not rain much, but it was full of lightning and of voices. We had not gone so very far, and it was growing dark when we heard shooting behind us in the direction of our deserted camp, and we thought the enemies were shooting into the teepees, thinking that we might be in there yet. I know better than ever now that I really had power, for I had prayed for help from the grandfathers, and they had heard me, and sent the thunder beings to hide us and watch over us while we fled. Then we went to the soldiers' town at the mouth of Tongue River, and camped there with others of our people who had wandered away from the reservations into our old country. The soldiers took our guns away from us and most of our horses, leaving us only 2 horses for every teepee. There in the moon of making fat, we had a sun dance, And after this, it seemed I could think of nothing but my vision. I was 16 years old and more, and I had not yet done anything the grandfathers wanted me to do, but they had been helping me. I did not know how to do what they wanted me to do. A terrible time began for me, and I could not tell anybody, not even my father and mother. I was afraid to see a cloud coming up, and whenever one did, I could hear the thunder beings calling to me, "Behold, your grandfathers, make haste." I could understand the birds when they sang, and they were always saying, "It is time, it is time." The crows in the day and the coyotes at night all called and called to me, "It is time, it is time, it is time." Time to do what? I did not know. I wondered if maybe I was only crazy, and my father and mother worried a great deal about me. When the frost began, I was glad, because there would not be any more thunderstorms for a long while, and I was more and more afraid of them all the time, for always there would be the voices crying, "Oh, hey, it is time, it is time." I could not tell them what was the matter, for then they would only think I was funnier than ever. I was 17 years old that winter. When the grasses were beginning to show their tender faces again, my father and mother asked an old medicine man by the name of Black Road to come over and see what he could do for me. By now, I was so afraid of being afraid of everything that I told him about my vision, and when I was through, he looked long at me and said, "Nephew, I know now what the trouble is. You must do what the bay horse in your vision wanted you to do. You must do your duty and perform this vision for your people upon earth. You must have the horse dance first for the people to see. Then the fear will leave you. But if you do not do this, something very bad will happen to you." After the horse dance was over, it seemed that I was above the ground and did not touch it. When I walked, I felt very happy, for I could see that my people were all happier. Many crowded around me and said that they or their relatives who had been feeling sick were well again, and these gave me many gifts. Even the horses seemed to be healthier and happier after the dance. The fear that was on me so long was gone, and when thunderclouds appeared, I was always glad to see them, for they came as relatives to visit me. Everything seemed good and beautiful now, and kind. We stayed there near the mouth of the tongue until the end of the moon of making fat. Then the soldier chief told us that we could not be in that country because we had sold it and it was not ours anymore. We had not sold it, but the soldiers took all the rest of our horses from us and what guns we had and loaded us on a big fireboat that carried us down the Yellowstone and the Missouri to Fort Yates. There they unloaded us, and it was one of the new reservations they had made for the Lakota. The soldiers had taken the ponies away from all our people, and they said the Great Father in Washington would pay us for them. But if he ever did, I have not heard of it. I learned that my own band, the Oglalas, had been taken back to the country where we are now, and I decided that I ought to go there and perform my duty. So in the moon, when the plums are scarlet, I started with 3 others. We had to go afoot, and we had only bows and arrows for weapons. We traveled to the camp of the Burrells on Rosebud Creek, and then I came on alone to White Clay Creek, where the Washishus were building Pine Ridge Agency for the Oglalas. Our people called it the seat of Red Cloud, or the place where everything is disputed. There I stayed, and that winter, in the moon of popping trees, I was 18 years old. That was a very hard winter, and it was just like one long night with me laying awake, waiting and waiting and waiting for daybreak. For now the thunder beings were like relatives to me, and they had gone away when the frost came and would not come back until the grasses showed their tender faces again. Without them I felt lost, and I was alone, there among my people. They seemed heavy, heavy and dark, and they could not know that they were heavy and dark. I could feel them like a great burden upon me. But when I would go all through my vision again, I loved the burden and felt pity for my people. And now, when I look about me upon my people in despair, I feel like crying, and I wish my vision could have been given to a man more worthy. I wonder why it came to me, a pitiful old man who can do nothing. Men and women and children I have cured of sicknesses with the power the vision gave me. But my nation I could not help. If a man or woman or child dies, it does not matter long, for the nation lives on. It was the nation that was dying, and the vision was for the nation, but I have done nothing with it. After some time, I came to live here where I am now, between Wounded Knee Creek and Grass Creek. Others came too, and we made these little gray houses of logs that you see, and they are square. It is a bad way to live, for there can be no power in a square. You have noticed that everything an Indian does is in a circle, and that is because the power of the world always works in circles, and everything tries to be round. In the old days, when we were a strong and happy people, all our power came to us from the sacred hoop of the nation. And so long as the hoop was unbroken, the people flourished. The flowering tree was the living center of the hoop, and the circle of the four quarters nourished it. The east gave peace and light, the south gave warmth, the west gave rain, and the north with its cold and mighty wind gave strength and endurance. This knowledge came to us from the outer world without religion. Everything the power of the world does is done in a circle. The sky is round, and I have heard that the earth is round like a ball, and so are all the stars. The wind in its greatest power whirls. Birds make their nest in circles, for theirs is the same religion as ours. The sun comes forth and goes down again in a circle. The moon does the same, and both are round. Even the seasons form a great circle in their changing and always coming back again to where they were. The life of a man is a circle from childhood to childhood, and so it is in everything where power moves. Our teepees were round like the nest of birds, and these were always set in a circle. The nation's hoop, a nest of many nests, where the Great Spirit meant for us to hatch our children. But the Washishus have put us in these square boxes. Our power is gone, and we are dying. For the power is not in us anymore. We can look at our boys and see how it is with us. When we were living by the power of the circle in the way we should, boys were men at 12 or 13 years of age. But now, it takes them very much longer to mature. Well, it is as it is. We are prisoners of war while we are waiting here, but there is another world. One day in the moon of fatness, when everything was blooming, I invited one side to come over and eat with me. I had been thinking about the four-rayed herb that I had now seen twice in my vision. I knew that I must have this herb for curing, and I thought I could recognize the place where I had seen it growing in my visions. One side was willing to help me, so we got on our horses and rode over to Grass Creek. There, right on the side of a bank, the herb was growing, and I knew it, although I had never seen one like it before except in my vision. It had a root about as long as to my elbow, and this was a little thicker than my thumb. It was flowering in four colors: blue, white, red, and yellow. We got off our horses, and after I had offered red willow bark to the six powers, I made a prayer to the herb and said to it, "Now we shall go forth to the two-leggeds, but only to the weakest ones, and there shall be happy days among the weak." Something must have told me to find the herb just then, for the next evening I needed it and could have done nothing without it. I was eating supper when a man by the name of Cuts Two Pieces came in, and he was saying, "Hey, hey, hey," for he was in trouble. He said, "I have a little boy of mine, and he is very sick, and I am afraid he will die soon. He has been sick a long time. They say you have great power, so maybe you can save him for me. I think so much of him." I told Cuts to Pieces that if he really wanted help, he should go home and bring me back a sacred chanupa with an eagle feather on it. While he was gone, I thought about what I had to do, and I was afraid, because I had never cured anybody yet with my power, and I was very sorry for Cuts to Pieces. I prayed hard for help. When Cuts to Pieces came back with the sacred chanupa, I sent for one side to come and help me. Then I took the sacred chanupa and went to where the sick little boy was. My father and my mother went with us, and my friend, Standing Bear, was already there. I first offered the sacred chanupa to the six powers, then I passed it, and we all smoked. After that, I began making a rumbling thunder sound on the drum. You know, when the power of the West comes to the two-leggeds, it comes with rumbling, and when it has passed, everything lifts up its head and is glad, and there is greenness. So I made this rumbling sound. Also, the voice of the drum is an offering to the spirit of the world. Its sound arouses the mind and makes men feel the mystery and power of things. When we entered the teepee, we went around from left to right, stopping on the west side when we had made the circle. You want to know why we always go from left to right like that? I can tell you something of the reason, but not all. Think of this. Is not the south the source of life, and does not the flowering stick truly come from there? And does not man advance from there toward the setting sun of his life? Then does he not approach the colder north where the white hairs are? And does he not then arrive, if he lives, at the source of light and understanding, which is the east? Then does he not return to where he began, to his second childhood, there to give back his life to all life and his flesh to the earth whence it came? The more you think about this, the more meaning you will see in it. The sick little boy looked as though he were only skin and bones. I held the sacred chanupa, the drum, and the four red herb already. So I asked for a wooden cup full of water and an eagle bone whistle, which was for the spotted eagle of my great vision. Everything was ready now, so I made low thunder on the drum, keeping time as I sent forth a voice. 4 times I cried, "Hi-ya, hey," drumming as I cried to the spirit of the world. And while I was doing this, I could feel the power coming through me from my feet up, and I knew that I could help the sick little boy. I kept on sending a voice while I made low thunder on the drum, saying, "My grandfather, Great Spirit, you are the only one. To no other can anyone send voices. You have made everything, they say, and you have made it good and beautiful. You have said this to me, the weak shall walk. In vision you have taken me to the center of the world, and there you have shown me the power to make over. To you and to all your powers, and to Mother Earth I send a voice for help. You see, I have never done this before, and I now know that only one power would have been enough. But I was so eager to help the sick little boy that I called on every power there is. When I looked at the sick little boy again, he smiled at me, and I could feel that the power was getting stronger. I next took the cup of water, drank a little of it, and went around to where the sick little boy was. Standing before him, I stamped the earth 4 times. Then putting my mouth to the pit of his stomach, I drew through him the cleansing wind of the north. I next chewed some of the herb and put it in the water. Afterward, blowing some of it on the boy and to the 4 quarters, the cup with the rest of the water, I gave to the pretty young daughter of Cuts to Pieces. Then I told the Virgin to help the boy stand up and to walk around the circle with him. Beginning at the south, the source of life, he was very poor and weak, but with the Virgin's help, he did this. Then I went away. Next day, Cuts to Pieces came and told me that his little boy was feeling better and was sitting up and could eat something again. In 4 days, he could walk around. He got well and lived to be 30 years old. I think I have told you, but if I have not, you must have understood that a man who has a vision is not able to use the power of it until after he has performed the vision on earth for the people to see. You remember that my great vision came to me when I was only 9 years old, and you have seen that I was not much good for anything until after I had performed the horse dance near the mouth of the Tongue River during my 18th summer. And if the great fear had not come upon me as it did and forced me to do my duty, I might have been less good to the people than some man who had never dreamed at all, even with the memory of so great a vision in me. But the fear came, and if I had not obeyed it, I am sure it would have killed me in a little while. It was even then only after another ceremony in which I performed a vision that I had the power to practice as a medicine man, curing sick people, and many I cured with the power that came through me. Of course, it was not I who cured. It was the power from the outer world, and the visions and ceremonies had only made me like a hole through which the power could come to the two-leggeds. If I thought that I was doing it myself, the hole would close up and no power could come through. Then everything I could do would be foolish. To use the power of the buffalo, I had to perform that part of my vision for the people to see. I was in my 20th year when I performed the elk ceremony, as a duty to that part of my great vision. You will remember how the sacred Chanupa and the Tatanka were in the east and the elk in the south. It is from understanding that power comes, and the power in the ceremony was in understanding what it meant. For nothing can live well except in the manner that is suited to the way the sacred power of the world lives and moves. After this, I went on curing sick people, and I was busy doing this. I was in doubt no longer. I felt like a man, and I could feel the power with me all the time. That fall, after I performed the ceremony of the elk, they say the last of the buffalo herds was slaughtered by the Wasishus. I can remember when the buffalo were so many that they could not be counted, but more and more Wasishus came to kill them. The Wasishus did not kill them to eat. They killed them for the metal that makes them crazy, and they took only the hides to sell. Sometimes they did not even take the hides, only the tongues. You can see that the men who did this were crazy. Sometimes they did not even take the tongues. They just killed and killed because they liked to do that. When we hunted buffalo, we killed only what we needed. And when there was nothing left but heaps of bones, the Wasishus came and gathered up even the bones and sold them. All our people now were settling down in square gray houses, scattered here and there across this hungry land, and around them the Wasishus had drawn a line to keep them in. The nation's hoop was broken, and there was no center any longer for the flowering tree. The people were in despair. They seemed heavy to me, heavy and dark, so heavy that it seemed they could not be lifted, so dark that they could not be made to see any more. Hunger was among us often, for much of what the Great Father in Washington sent us must have been stolen by Wasishus, who were crazy to get money. I kept on curing the sick for 3 years more, and many came to me and were made over. But when I thought of my great vision, I felt like crying, for the sacred hoop was broken and scattered. The life of the people was in the hoop, and what are many little lives if the life of those lives be gone? But late in my 23rd summer, it seemed that there was a little hope. There came to us some Wasishus who wanted a band of Ogalalas for a big show that the other Pahushka had. They told us this show would be across the big water to strange lands, and I thought I ought to go because I might learn some secret of the Wasishu that would help my people somehow. Maybe if I could see the great world of the Wasishu, I could understand how to bring the sacred hoop together and make the tree to bloom again at the center of it. I looked back on the past and recalled my people's old ways, but they were not living that way anymore. They were traveling the black road, everybody for himself, and with little rules of his own, as in my vision. I was in despair, and I even thought that if the Washishus had a better way, then maybe my people should live that way. I know now that this was foolish, but I was young and in despair. The show people sent wagons from Rushville on the Iron Road to get us, and we were about 100 men and women. Many of our people followed us halfway to the Iron Road, and there we camped and ate together. Afterward, we left our people crying there, for we were going very far across the big water. We roared along on the Iron Road for 3 days. The towns we came to got bigger and bigger until we were at a very big town called New York. And right there I could compare my people's ways with Washishu ways, and this made me sadder than before. I wished and wished that I had not gone away from home. I was surprised at the big houses and so many people, and there were bright lights at night so that you could not see the stars, and some of the lights I heard were made with the power of thunder. We stayed there and made shows for many Wasishus all that winter. After a while, I got used to being there, but I was like a man who had never had a vision. I felt dead and my people seemed lost, and I thought I might never find them again. I did not see anything to help my people. I could see that the Washishus did not care for each other the way our people did before the nation's hoop was broken. They would take everything from each other if they could, and so there were some who had more of everything than they could use, while crowds of people had nothing at all and maybe were starving. They had forgotten that the earth was their mother. This could not be better than the old ways of my people. There was a prisoner's house on an island where the big water came up to the town, and we saw that one day. Men pointed guns at the prisoners and made them move around like animals in a cage. This made me feel very sad, because my people too were penned up in islands, and maybe that was the way the Washishus were going to treat them. In the spring it got warmer, but the Washishus had even the grass penned up. Some of our people went home and wanted me to go with them, but I had not seen anything good for my people yet. Maybe across the big water there was something to see, so I did not go home, although I was sick and in despair. They put us all on a very big fireboat, so big that when I first saw, I could hardly believe it, and when it sent forth a voice, I was frightened. After a while, I could see nothing but water, and we did not seem to be going anywhere, just up and down. But we were told that we were going fast. If we were, I thought that we must drop off where the water ended, or maybe we might have to stop where the sky came down to the water. When evening came, a big wind was roaring and the water thundered. We had things that were meant to be hung up while we slept in them. This I learned afterwards. We did not know what to do with these, so we spread them out on the floor and lay down on them. The floor tipped in every direction, and this got worse and worse, so that we rolled from one side to the other and could not sleep. We were frightened, and now we were all very sick too. At first the Washishus laughed at us, but very soon we could see that they were frightened too, because they were running around and were very much excited. Our women were crying, and even some of the men cried, because it was terrible and they could do nothing. After a while the Washishus came and gave us things to tie around us so that we could float. I did not put on the one they gave me. I did not want to float. Instead, I dressed for death, putting on my best clothes that I wore in the show, and then I sang my death song. Others dressed for death too, and sang because if it was the end of our lives and we could do nothing, we wanted to die brave. We could not fight this that was going to kill us, but we could die so that our spirit relatives would not be ashamed of us. It was harder for us because we were all so sick. Everything we had eaten came right up, and then it kept on trying to come up when there was nothing there. Some of the buffalo and elk that we had with us for the show died, and the Wasishus threw them into the water. When I saw the poor buffalo thrown over, I felt like crying, because I thought right there they were throwing part of the power of my people away. After we had been on the fireboat a long while, we could see many houses, and then many other fireboats tied close together along the bank. The name of this very big town was London. We stayed in this place 6 months, and many people came to see the show. One day we were told that Majesty was coming. I did not know what that was at first, but I learned afterward. It was Grandmother England, who owned Grandmother's land where we lived a while after the Washishus murdered Crazy Horse. She came to the show in a big shining wagon, and there were soldiers on both sides of her, and many other shining wagons came too. That day, other people could not come to the show, just Grandmother England and some people who came with her. Sometimes we had to shoot in the show, but this time we did not shoot at all. We danced and sang, and I was one of the dancers chosen to do this for the grandmother, because I was young and limber then and could dance many ways. We stood right in front of Grandmother England. She was little but fat, and we liked her because she was good to us. After we had danced, she spoke to us. She said something like this: I am 67 years old. All over the world I have seen all kinds of people, but today I have seen the best looking people I know. If you belonged to me, I would not let them take you around in a show like this. She said other good things too, and then she said we must come to see her because she had come to see us. She shook hands with all of us. Her hand was very little and soft. We gave a big cheer for her. In about a half moon after that, we went to see the grandmother. They put us in some of those shining wagons and took us to a very beautiful place where there was a very big house with sharp pointed towers on it. There were many seats built high in a circle, and these were just full of Washishus, who were all pounding their heels and yelling, "Jubilee, Jubilee, Jubilee." I never heard what this meant. They put us together in a certain place at the bottom of the seats. All the people in the seats were roaring and yelling, "Jubilee" and "Victoria." Then we saw Grandmother England again. Her dress was all shining, and her hat was all shining, and her wagon was all shining, and so were the horses. She looked like a fire coming. When she came to where we were, her wagon stopped and she stood up. Then all those people stood up and roared and bowed to her. But she bowed to us. We sent up a great cry, and our women made the tremolo. Then, when it was quiet, we sang a song to the grandmother. That was a very happy time. We liked Grandmother England because we could see that she was a fine woman and she was good to us. Maybe if she had been our grandmother, it would have been better for our people. Yes, that was a happy time, but it was all over. We went to Manchester and had a show there for several moons. When the show was going to leave very early next morning, 3 other young men and myself got lost in Manchester, and the fireboat went away without us. We could not talk the Washishu language, and we did not know what to do, so we just roamed around. After a while, we found 2 other Lakotas who had been left behind, and one of these could talk English. He said if we went to London, we could get money in another show that was there, and then we could go home. We were all sick to go home, so the English talker got some tickets with the money we all had together, and we went to London on the Iron Road. The show was called Mexican Joe. It was a small show, but they gave us $1 every day for being in it. After we had been in London a while, Mexican Joe took us to Paris, and we had a show there a long while. There was a Washishu girl who came to the show very often. She liked me and took me home to see her father and mother. They liked me too and were good to me. I could not talk their language. I made signs, and the girl learned a few Lakota words. I was more and more sick to go home all the time because it had been 2 winters since I went away. Then one morning I did go home for a while. I was feeling well, and we were just sitting down to eat the first meal. This girlfriend of mine was sitting by me, and her mother and father and 2 sisters were sitting down too. As we sat there, I looked up at the roof, and it seemed to be moving. The house was going around, up at the top, and stretching upward as it went around. I could see that we were all rising fast with the whole house, and it was turning around as it rose. Then a cloud was coming down as we rose, and suddenly I was on it, and the other people and the house were falling back away from me. Then I was alone on this cloud, and it was going fast. I clung to it hard because I was afraid I might fall off. Far down below I could see houses and towns and green land and streams, and it all looked flat. Then I was right over the big water. I was not afraid anymore because by now I knew I was going home. It was dark, and then it was light again, and I could see a big town below me, and I saw that I was in my own country again. I was very happy now. The cloud and I kept on going very fast, and I could see towns and streams and towns and green land. Then I was right over Pine Ridge, and the cloud stopped. I looked down and could not understand what I saw, because it seemed that nearly all of my people of the different bands were gathered together, there in a big camp. I saw my father's and mother's teepee. They were outside, and she was cooking. I wanted to jump off the cloud and be with them, but I was afraid it would kill me. While I was looking down, my mother looked up, and I felt sure she saw me. But just then, the cloud started back, going very fast. I was very sad, but I could not get off. The cloud carried me back to the girl's house. Then I was lying on my back in bed, and the English talker from the show told me how it was. While I was sitting at breakfast, they said I had looked up and smiled, and then I had fallen like dead out of my chair. I had been dead 3 days, except that once in a while I would breathe just a little. Often, they said, they could not feel my heart at all. They were sure I would soon be really dead, and they were getting ready to buy my coffin. Maybe if I had not come back to life that time, they would have given me a good coffin. But as it is, I think it will only be a box. I did not tell the people where I had been because I knew they could not believe me. A few days after that, these people heard that Pahushka was in town again. So they took me to where he had his show, and he was glad to see me. He had all his people give me 3 cheers. Then he asked me if I wanted to be in the show or if I wanted to go home. I told him I was sick to go home. So he said he would fix that. He gave me a ticket and $90. Then he gave me a big dinner. Pahushka had a strong heart. He put me on another big fireboat. We were on the water 8 days. I was sick part of the time, but I was not sad because I was going home. When I got to Pine Ridge, everything was just as I had seen it from the cloud. All the Lakotas were there as I had seen them, because that was the year of the treaty, when the Washishus bought some more of our land. My mother's teepee was right where I had seen it. When I looked down from the cloud, and other people were camped exactly where I saw them. My parents were in great joy to see me, and my mother cried because she was so happy. I cried too. I was supposed to be a man now, but the tears came out anyway. My mother told me she had dreamed one night in her sleep that I had come back on a cloud, but could not stay. So I told her about my vision. There was hunger among my people before I went away across the big water, because the Washishus did not give us all the food they promised in the Black Hills Treaty. They made that treaty themselves. Our people did not want it and did not make it. Yet the Washishus who made it had given us less than half as much as they promised. So the people were hungry before I went away. But it was worse when I came back. My people looked pitiful. There was a big drought, and the rivers and creeks seemed to be dying. Nothing would grow that the people had planted, and the Washishus had been sending less cattle and other food than ever before. The Washishus had slaughtered all the buffalo and shut us up in pens. It looked as though we might all starve to death. We could not eat lies, and there was nothing we could do. And now the Washishus had made another treaty to take away from us about half the land we had left. Our people did not want this treaty either. But 3 Stars came and made the treaty just the same because the Washishus wanted our land. So the flood of Washishus, dirty with bad deeds, gnawed away half of the land that was left to us. So it was, our people were pitiful and in despair. But early that summer, when I came back from across the big water, strange news had come from the west, and the people had been talking about it. They were talking about it when I came home, and that was the first I had heard of it. It was hard to believe, and when I first heard of it, I thought it was only foolish talk that somebody had started somewhere. This news said that out west, at a place near where the great mountains stand before you came to the big waters, there was a sacred man among the Paiutes who had talked to the Great Spirit in a vision, and the Great Spirit had told him how to save the Indian peoples and make the Washishus disappear and bring back all the buffalo and the people who were dead, and how there would be a new earth. Before I came back, the people had got together to talk about this, and they had sent 3 men, Good Thunder, Brave Bear, and Yellow Breast, to see this sacred man with their own eyes and learn if the story about him was true. So these 3 men had made the long journey west, and in the fall after I came home, they returned to the Ogolalas with wonderful things to tell. These 3 men all said the same thing, and they were good men. They saw the Wanikia, who was the son of the Great Spirit, and they talked to him. Washishus called him Jack Wilson, but his name was Wovoka. He told them that there was another world coming, just like a cloud. It would come in a whirlwind out of the west and would crush out everything in this world, which was old and dying. In that other world there was plenty of meat, just like old times. And in that world all the dead Indians were alive, and all the buffalo that had ever been killed were roaming around again. This sacred man gave some Wakan red paint and 2 eagle feathers to Good Thunder. The people must put this paint on their faces, and they must dance a ghost dance that the sacred man taught to Good Thunder, Yellow Breast, and Brave Bear. If they did this, they could get on this other world when it came, and the Washishus would not be able to get on, and so they would disappear. When he gave the 2 eagle feathers to Good Thunder, the Wakan man said, "Receive these eagle feathers and behold them, for my father will cause these to bring your people back to him." This was all that was heard the whole winter. My father died in the first part of the winter from the bad sickness that many people had. This made me very sad. Everything good seemed to be going away. My younger brother and sister had died before I came home, and now I was fatherless in this world. But I still had my mother. I was working in a store for the Washishus so that I could get something for her to eat, and I just kept on working there and thinking about what Good Thunder, Yellow Breast, and Brave Bear had told. But I did not feel sure yet. Then it was spring, and I heard the gossip that was everywhere now, and people said it was really the son of the Great Spirit who was out there. That when he came to the Washishus a long time ago, they had killed him. But he was coming to the Indians this time, and there would not be any Washishus in the new world that would come like a cloud in a whirlwind and crush out the old earth that was dying. This they said would happen after one more winter when the grasses were appearing. I heard many wonderful things about the Wanikia that men had seen and heard, and they were good men. He could make animals talk, and once while they were with him, he made a spirit vision, and they all saw it. They saw a big water, and beyond it was a beautiful green land, where all the Indians that ever lived, and the buffalo, and the other animals were all coming home together. Then the Wanikia, they said, made the vision go out, because it was not yet time for this to happen. After another winter, it would happen when the grasses were appearing. Good Thunder himself told me that, with the power of the Wanikia, he had gone to a buffalo skin teepee, and there his son, who had been dead a long time, was living with his wife, and they had a long talk together. This was not like my great vision, and I just went on working in the store. I was puzzled and did not know what to think. After a while, I heard that north of Pine Ridge they had held a dance, and that people who danced had seen their dead relatives and talked to them. The next thing I heard was that they were dancing on Wounded Knee just below Manderson. I did not believe yet, but I wanted to find out things, because all this was sitting more and more strongly in my heart since my father died. Something seemed to tell me to go and see. For a while I kept from going, but at last I could not anymore. So I got on my horse and went to this ghost dance on Wounded Knee Creek below Manderson. I was surprised and could hardly believe what I saw, because so much of my vision seemed to be in it. I sat there looking on and feeling sad. It all seemed to be from my great vision somehow, and I had done nothing yet to make the tree to bloom. Then all at once, great happiness overcame me, and it all took hold of me right there. This was to remind me to get to work at once and help to bring my people back into the sacred hoop, that they might again walk the red road in a sacred manner, pleasing to the powers of the universe that are one power. I remembered how the spirits had taken me to the center of the earth and shown me the good things, and how my people should prosper. I remember how the 6 grandfathers had told me that through their power I should make my people live and the holy tree should bloom. I believed my vision was coming true at last, and happiness overcame me. When I went to the dance, I went only to see and to learn what the people believed. But now I was going to stay and use the power that had been given me. The dance was over for that day, but they would dance again next day. I would dance with them. When Good Thunder and Kicking Bear came back in the spring from seeing the Wanikia, the Washishus at Pine Ridge put them in prison a while and then let them go. This showed the Washishus were afraid of something. In the moon of black cherries, many people were dancing at No Waters Camp on Clay Creek, and the agent came and told them to stop dancing. They would not stop, and they said they would fight for their religion if they had to do it. The agent went away, and they kept on dancing. They called him Young Man Afraid of Lakotas. Word came to us that the Indians were beginning to dance everywhere. The people were hungry and in despair, and many believed in the good new world that was coming. The Washishus gave us less than half the beef cattle they promised us in the treaty, and these cattle were very poor. For a while our people would not take the cattle because there were so few of them and they were so poor, but after a while they had to take them or starve to death. When I came back from the Burrows, we heard that there were soldiers at Pine Ridge and that others were coming all the time. Then one morning we heard that the soldiers were marching toward us, so we broke camp and moved west to Grass Creek. From there we went to White Clay and camped a while and danced. There came to us Fire Thunder, Red Wound, and Young American Horse with a message from the soldiers that this matter of the ghost dance must be looked into, and that there should be rulings over it, and that they did not mean to take the dance away from us. But could we believe anything the Washishus ever said to us? They spoke with forked tongues. We moved in closer to Pine Ridge and camped. Many soldiers were there now, and what were they there for? There was a big meeting with the agent. He made a ruling that we could dance 3 days every moon, and the rest of the time we should go and make a living for ourselves somehow. He did not say how we could do that, but the people agreed to this. The next day, while I was sitting in a teepee with good thunder, a policeman came to us and said, "I was not sent here, but I came here for your good to tell you what I have heard, that they are going to arrest you too." Good Thunder thought we ought to go to the Burls, who had a big camp on Wounded Knee below Manderson, so that evening we went. I spoke to the Burls, and this is what I said. "My relatives, there is a certain thing that we have done. From that Wakan thing, we have had visions. In those visions we have seen, and also we have heard, that our relatives who have gone before us are in the other world that has been revealed to us, and that we too shall go there. They are right now with the Wanikia. If the Washishus want to fight us, let them do it. Have in your minds a strong desire and take courage. We must depend upon the departed ones who are in the new world that is coming." More Burls came, and we all broke camp, moving down the Wounded Knee to Smoky Earth River. There a Black Robe came and tried to coax us to return. Our people told him that Washishu promises were no good, that everything they had promised was a lie. Only a few Ogolalas turned back with the Black Robe. American Horse and Fast Thunder came to us. They were both chiefs, and they came to bring us into Pine Ridge. We had to obey. The Burls would not obey and tried to keep us from going. They struck us, and there was quite a struggle for a while. But we went anyway, because we had to go. Kicking Bear stayed with the Burls that time, but he came to the Pine Ridge a little later. A very few of the Burls went along with us. It was about this time that bad news came to us from the north. We heard that some policeman from Standing Rock had gone to arrest Sitting Bull on Grand River, and that he would not let them take him, so there was a fight, and they killed him. It was now near the end of the moon of popping trees, and I was 27 years old. We heard that Bigfoot was coming down from the Badlands with nearly 400 people. Some of them were from Sitting Bull's band. They had run away when Sitting Bull was killed and joined Bigfoot on Good River. There were only about 100 warriors in this band, and all the others were women and children and some old men. They were all starving and freezing, and Bigfoot was so sick that they had to bring him along in a pony drag. They had all run away to hide in the Badlands, and they were coming in now because they were starving and freezing. Soldiers were over there looking for them. The soldiers had everything and were not freezing and starving. Near Porcupine Butte, the soldiers came up on the Bigfoots, and they surrendered and went along with the soldiers to Wounded Knee Creek, where the Brennan store is now. It was in the evening when we heard that the Bigfoots were camped over there with the soldiers, about 15 miles by the old road from where we were. It was the next morning, and something terrible happened. That evening before it happened, I went into Pine Ridge and heard these things, and while I was there, soldiers started for where the Bigfoots were. These made about 500 soldiers that were there next morning. When I saw them starting, I felt that something terrible was going to happen. In the morning, I went out after my horses, and while I was out, I heard shooting off toward the east, and I knew from the sound that it must be wagon guns going off. The sounds went right through my body, and I felt that something terrible would happen. I painted my face all red, and in my hair I put one eagle feather for the one above. I started out alone on the old road that ran across the hills to Wounded Knee. I had no gun. I carried only the sacred bow of the west that I had seen in my great vision. I had gone only a little way when a band of young men came galloping after me. Then others were coming up, and some older men. We rode fast. and there were about 20 of us now. The shooting was getting louder. In a little while, we had come to the top of the ridge, where looking to the east, you can see, for the first time, the monument and the burying ground on the little hill where the church is. That is where the terrible thing started. Just south of the burying ground on the little hill, a deep dry gulch runs about east and west, very crooked, and it rises westward to nearly the top of the ridge where we were. It had no name, but the Washishus sometimes call it Battle Creek now. We stopped on the ridge, not far from the head of the dry gulch. Wagon guns were still going off over there on the little hill. There was much shooting down there, and there were many cries, and we could see cavalrymen scattered over the hills ahead of us. Cavalrymen were riding along the gulch and shooting into it, where the women and children were running away and trying to hide in the gullies and the stunted pines. A little way ahead of us, just below the head of the dry gulch, there were some women and children who were huddled under a clay bank, and some cavalrymen were there pointing guns at them. We stopped back behind the ridge, and I said to the others, "Take courage. These are our relatives. We will try to get them back." Then I rode over the ridge, and the others after me, and we were crying, "Take courage. It is time to fight." The soldiers who were guarding our relatives shot at us and then ran away fast. We got our relatives and sent them across the ridge to the northwest where they would be safe. I had no gun, and when we were charging, I just held the sacred bow out in front of me with my right hand. The bullets did not hit us at all. We found a little baby lying all alone near the head of the gulch. I could not pick her up just then, but I got her later, and some of my people adopted her. I just wrapped her up tighter in a shawl that was around her and left her there. It was a safe place, and I had other work to do. By now, many other Lakotas who had heard the shooting were coming up from Pine Ridge, and we all charged on the soldiers. They ran eastward toward where the trouble began. We followed. And what we saw was terrible. Dead and wounded women and children and little babies were scattered all along there, where they had been trying to run away. The soldiers had followed along the gulch as they ran and murdered them in there. Sometimes bunches of them had been killed and torn to pieces where the wagon guns hit them. I saw a little baby trying to suck its mother, but she was bloody and dead. There were 2 little boys at one place in this gulch. They had guns and they had been killing soldiers all by themselves. These boys were all alone there, and they were not hurt. They were very brave little boys. When we drove the soldiers back, they dug themselves in, and we were not enough people to drive them out from there. In the evening, they marched off up Wounded Knee Creek, and then we saw all that they had done. Men and women and children were heaped and scattered all over the hill where the soldiers had their wagon guns, and westward up the dry gulch all the way to the high ridge. The dead women and children and babies were scattered. When I saw this, I wished that I had died too, but I was not sorry for the women and children. It was better for them to be happy in the other world, and I wanted to be there too. But before I went there, I wanted to have revenge. I thought there might be a day and we should have revenge. After the soldiers marched away, I heard from my friend, Dog Chief, how the trouble started. This is the way it was. In the morning, the soldiers began to take all the guns away from the Bigfoots. The people had stacked most of their guns and even their knives by the teepee where Bigfoot was lying sick. Soldiers were on the little hill and all around. The people were nearly surrounded, and the wagon guns were pointing at them. Some had not yet given up their guns, and so the soldiers were searching all the teepees, throwing things around and poking into everything. There was a man called Yellowbird, and he and another man were standing in front of the teepee where Bigfoot was lying sick. An officer came to search them. He took the other man's gun and then started to take Yellowbird's, but Yellowbird would not let go. He wrestled with the officer, and while they were wrestling, the gun went off and killed the officer. Wasishus and some others have said he meant to do this, but Dog Chief was standing right there, and he told me it was not so. As soon as the gun went off, an officer shot and killed Bigfoot, who was lying sick inside the teepee. Then suddenly nobody knew what was happening, except that the soldiers were all shooting and the wagon guns began going off right in among the people. There were only about 100 warriors, and there were nearly 500 soldiers. The warriors rushed to where they had piled their guns and knives. They fought soldiers with only their hands until they got to their guns. It was a good winter day when all this happened. The sun was shining, but after the soldiers marched away from their dirty work, a heavy snow began to fall. The wind came up in the night. There was a big blizzard, and it grew very cold. The snow drifted deep into the crooked gulch, and it was one long grave of butchered women and children and babies who had never done any harm and were only trying to run away. After the soldiers marched away, Red Crow and I started back toward Pine Ridge together, and I took the little baby that I told you about. Red Crow had one too. We were going back to Pine Ridge because we thought there was peace back home, but it was not so. While we were gone, there was a fight around the agency, and our people had all gone away. They had gone away so fast that they left all the teepees standing. It was nearly dark when we passed north of Pine Ridge. We rode into the camp and it was all empty. We were very hungry because we had not eaten anything since early morning. So we looked into the teepees until we saw where there was a pot with papa cooked in it. We sat down in there and began to eat. While we were doing this, the soldiers shot at the teepee, and a bullet struck right between Red Crow and me. It threw dust in the soup, but we kept right on eating until we had our fill. If that bullet had only killed me, then I would have died with papa in my mouth. The people had fled down Clay Creek, and we followed their trail. It was dark now and late in the night. We came to where they were camped without any teepees. They were just sitting by little fires, and the snow was beginning to blow. We rode in among them, and I heard my mother's voice. She was singing a death song for me, because she felt sure I had died over there. She was so glad to see me that she cried and cried. Women who had milk-fed the little babies that Red Crow and I brought with us. I think nobody but the little children slept any that night. The snow blew and we had no teepees. When it was getting light, a war party went out and I went along, but this time I took a gun with me. When I started out the day before to Wounded Knee, I took only my sacred bow, which was not made to shoot with, because I was a little in doubt about the Wanikia religion at that time, and I did not really want to kill anybody because of it. But I did not feel like that anymore. After what I had seen over there, I wanted revenge. I wanted to kill. So we struck west following a ridge to where the fight was. It was close to the mission, and there are many bullets in the mission yet. From the ridge, we could see that the Lakotas were on both sides of the creek and were shooting at soldiers who were coming down the creek. As we looked down, we saw a little ravine, and across this was a big hill. We crossed and rode up the hillside. They were fighting right there, and a Lakota cried to me, "Black Elk, this is the kind of a day in which to do something great." I answered, "How?" Then I got off my horse and rubbed earth on myself to show the powders that I was nothing without their help. Right below me the soldiers were shooting, and my people called out to me not to go down there, that there was some good shots among the soldiers, and I should get killed for nothing. But I remembered my great vision, the part where the geese of the north appeared. I depended upon their power. Stretching out my arms with my gun in the right hand, like a goose soaring when it flies low to turn in a change of weather, I made the sound the geese make, rup, rup, rup. And doing this, I charged. The soldiers saw and began shooting fast at me. I kept right on with my buckskin running, shot in their faces when I was near, then swung wide and rode back up the hill. All this time the bullets were buzzing around me, and I was not touched. I was not even afraid. It was like being in a dream about shooting. But just as I had reached the very top of the hill, suddenly it was like waking up, and I was afraid. I dropped my arms and quit making the goose cry. Just as I did this, I felt something strike my belt, as though someone had hit me there with the back of an axe. I nearly fell out of my saddle, but I managed to hold on and rode over the hill. An old man by the name of Protector was there, and he ran up and held me, for now I was falling off my horse. My insides were coming out. Protector tore up a blanket in strips and bound it around me so that my insides would stay in. By now I was crazy to kill, and I said to Protector, "Help me on my horse, let me go over there. It is a good day to die." "So I will go over there." But Protector said, "No, young nephew, you must not die today. That would be foolish. Your people need you. There may be a better day to die." He lifted me into my saddle and led my horse away downhill. Then I began to feel very sick. By now it looked as though the soldiers would be wiped out and the Lakotas were fighting harder. But I heard that after I left, the black Washishu soldiers came and the Lakotas had to retreat. There was a man by the name of Little Soldier who took charge of me and brought me to where old Hollow Horn was. He was a very powerful bear medicine man, and he came over to heal my wound. In 3 days I could walk, but I kept a piece of blanket tied around my belly. It was now nearly the middle of the moon of frost in the teepee. We heard that soldiers were coming to attack us, so a party of about 60 of us started on the warpath to find them. My mother tried to keep me at home because although I could walk and ride a horse, my wound was not all healed yet. But I would not stay, for after what I had seen at Wounded Knee, I wanted a chance to kill soldiers. Soon from the top of a little hill we saw wagons and cavalry guarding them. The soldiers were making a corral of their wagons and getting ready to fight. We got off of our horses and crept up to look at the camp. Some soldiers were bringing harnessed horses down to a little creek to water, and I said to the others, "If you will stay here and shoot at the soldiers, I will charge over there and get some good horses." They knew of my power, so they did this, and I charged on my buckskin while the others kept shooting. I got 7 of the horses, but when I started back with these, all the soldiers saw me and began shooting. They killed 2 of my horses, but I brought back 5 safe and was not hit. By now, more cavalry were coming up the river, a big bunch of them, and there was some hard fighting for a while, because there was not enough of us. We were fighting and retreating. But the soldiers did not follow us far into the Badlands, and when it was night, we rode back with our wounded. We wanted a much bigger war party so that we could meet the soldiers and get revenge. But this was hard because the people were not all of the same mind, and they were hungry and cold. We had a meeting there and were all ready to go out with more warriors when Afraid of his horses came over from Pine Ridge to make peace with Red Cloud, who was with us there. Our party wanted to go out and fight anyway, but Red Cloud made a speech to us, something like this: "Brothers, it is a very hard winter. The women and children are starving and freezing. If this were summer, I would say to keep on fighting to the end, but we cannot do this. We must think of the women and children, and that is very bad for them. So we must make peace, and I will see that nobody is hurt by the soldiers." The people agreed to this, for it was true. So we broke camp next day and went down to Pine Ridge, and many Lakotas were already there. Also there were many soldiers. They stood in 2 lines with their guns held in front of them as we went through to where we camped. And so it was all over. I did not know then how much was ended. When I look back now from this high hill of my old age, I can still see the butchered women and children lying heaped and scattered all along the Crooked Gulch, as plain as when I saw them with eyes still young. And I can see that something else died there in the bloody mud and was buried in the blizzard. A people's dream died there. It was a beautiful dream. and I, to whom so great a vision was given in my youth. You see me now, a pitiful old man, who has done nothing, for the nation's hoop is broken and scattered. There is no center any longer, and the sacred tree is dead. Therefore I am sending a voice. Great Spirit, my grandfather, forgetting nothing you have made, the stars of the universe and the grasses of the earth. You have said to me when I was still young and could hope, that in difficulty I should send a voice 4 times, once for each quarter of the earth, and you would hear me. Today I send a voice for a people in despair. With tears running, O Great Spirit, my grandfather, with running tears, I must say now that the tree has never bloomed. A pitiful old man you see here, and I have fallen away and have done nothing. Here at the center of the world, where you took me when I was young and taught me. Here, old, I stand and the tree is withered. Grandfather, my grandfather. Again, and maybe the last time on this earth, I recall the great vision you sent me. It may be that some little root of the sacred tree still lives. Nourish it, that it may leaf and bloom and fill with singing birds. Hear me, not for myself, but for my people. I am old. Hear me, that they may once more go back into the Wakan hoop and find the good red road, the shielding tree. In sorrow, I am sending a feeble voice. O 6 powers of the world, hear me in my sorrow, for I may never call again. O make my people live.